This week's Parsha is Parshas Tzav. Parshas Tzav continues the discussion from last week's Parsha of the Karbonos, of the sacrifices. The commentators note, in fact it's a Gemara in Menachos, that says, Zois Taras ha'olah, hi ha'olah. And it repeats by the Chatas also. Zois Taras ha'chatas, hi ha'chatas. It says that this is the Torah, the laws of the Olah. This is the Olah. So if you take that phrase and look at it by itself, what it sounds like it's saying is that the Torah of the Olah, the laws of the Olah, that is the real Olah. The laws of the Chatas, that is the real Chatas. The sacrifices, the actual actions taken throughout the sacrifices, the sprinkling, the slaughtering, the burning, and so on, those are the external actions that are taken throughout the process of a person sacrificing an animal. But the Torah, the laws, the details of what you're supposed to do and what it's supposed to mean to you, that is the real sacrifice. Person has to realize, we learn from this, that when we do actions, mitzvahs, as a whole, the purpose of the mitzvah is not the actual external action, it's how it impacts us internally. The Zohar says that a avera, a sin, extinguishes a mitzvah that we fulfill. Because external actions don't have as much impact as actual learning, as actual trying to make a difference to us. Just going through the activities of giving charity without having a charitable heart don't change us, don't bring us closer to Hashem as much as actually changing who we are. If we want to change who we are, we have to make those external actions mean something, make them change who we are. And that is what it means when it says, Zayis Tairas Ha'olah. This is the Torah of the Olah sacrifice. Hi Ha'olah. That's the actual Olah. The real Olah, the real sacrifice, that's the sacrifice that we take internally, not the external actions we take throughout the process of giving a sacrifice. That is the purpose of the sacrifice, and that is more important than the external actions. The Zohar over there continues and says that even though an avera, a sin, extinguishes a mitzvah, Torah cannot be extinguished. And this is symbolized, according to the commentators, by the fire on top of the altar. And there is a mitzvah for that fire that it can never be extinguished. And that is because what's inside, what we change inside of us through our external actions, through our mitzvahs, that cannot be extinguished. This parsha also discusses what happens with the vessels that came in contact with the flesh of the different sacrifices. Now, the flesh of the different sacrifices, even if it were to be eaten, even if the laws require it to be eaten, they all have a certain time allotment, or it has to be eaten within that time. If it passes that time, then you may no longer eat that flesh. That meat is now prohibited. Now the Torah says in this week's parsha that if a clay vessel, if an earthenware vessel comes in contact with any type of sacrifice, any type of flesh from a sacrifice, then after that, a time allotment, that vessel must be destroyed. It must be broken. Now this is very interesting because we know that throughout the year, though, at least biblically, the law is that after a 24-hour period, if a person, let's say, inadvertently puts something non-kosher in a vessel, and the vessel absorbs the flavor of that food, of that non-kosher item, then that vessel, yes, is now prohibited to use because it has the flavor of the non-kosher foods. But after 24 hours, biblically only, rabbinically it's still prohibited, but biblically at least, it has the status of Noisan Tam Lifgam. The flavor is now detrimental. It's no longer good flavor, and therefore there is no biblical prohibition to use that vessel. The commentators ask that why in the case of the sacrifices, though, do we see that after the time allotment, the vessels that were used, that came in contact with the flesh of the sacrifices, the halacha was not that you could continue using that vessel even biblically, even though the 24-hour period had already passed, and now the flavor was no longer a good flavor. It was a detrimental flavor, and therefore, at least looking at the laws of kashrus, how to keep kosher, there, biblically, it is allowed, and for some reason by the sacrifices, it is no longer allowed. Have a good Shabbos.